TomoNews presents China versus Japan.
Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reportedly approved the use of Air Force planes to shoot down unmanned Chinese aircraft in Japanese airspace. Chinese aircraft recently flew near the disputed islands, known as the Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China. 2 Chinese Y-8 early warning planes and 2 Chinese H-6 bombers flew over the area between Japan's Okinawa and Miyako Island before returning to the East China Sea on Sunday for the past 3 days in a row. Japan scrambled fighter jets on Sunday for the 3rd consecutive day and said it would shoot down drones entering Japanese airspace if they did not respond to warnings to leave. China responded on Saturday that shooting down Chinese drones will be considered an act of war by Beijing.
Chinese and Japanese men fight over Hong Kong taxi. A video published on YouTube recorded a crazy fight in Hong Kong over a taxi between a Chinese man and a Japanese man. A witness said the Chinese tourist was in Causeway Bay, waiting in line for a cab with other friends when the taxi arrived. A drunk Japanese man with his wife and kid cut in line and tried to get into the taxi. Needless to say, it would have taken much less for a Japanese man to make a Chinese man angry. The Chinese tourist yelled at him and a huge fight broke out. A crowd of onlookers gathered as the fight lasted for 6 to 7 minutes until police were able to separate the men. The Japanese man involved in the fight reported injuries to his neck and hands.
Chinese jets meters away from Japanese planes near disputed islands. Japan pointed the finger at China for heightening tension over the East China Sea after 2 pairs of Chinese jets flew extremely close to 2 Japanese surveillance planes in separate incidents on Saturday. The flybys took place near the disputed islands known as Senkakus in Japan and Diaoyu in China. The airspace is claimed by both Japan and China. The first incident involved a Japanese P-3C propeller-driven reconnaissance plane and 2 Chinese Su-27 fighter jets. Japan said that the 2 Chinese jets came as close as 50 meters from its surveillance plane. On the same day, 2 Chinese Su-27s approached a YS-11EB, a reconnaissance plane developed by Japan. The Chinese jets were only 30 meters away from the Japanese aircraft. China accused Japan of collecting intelligence and interfering with Chinese-Russian naval exercises that lasted from May 20th to May 26th. Japan said it would continue its surveillance activities to safeguard its territory.
Joint drills with the Philippines may signal Japan's growing involvement in the South China Sea. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang warned yesterday that joint drills being conducted by Japan and the Philippines in the South China Sea were undermining security in the region. Despite the warning, the Philippines and Japan today flew patrol planes for a second day, including a P-3C Orion surveillance aircraft near disputed areas of the South China Sea. The flights took place in the general direction of the resource-rich Reed Bank. Although it falls within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, China has contested this claim. Japan and the Philippines have insisted their joint drills are a peaceful exercise intended to strengthen humanitarian and disaster response efforts between the former World War II foes. While some welcome a growing Japanese presence in the region, Japan's military is stretched by territorial disputes with China and the threat from North Korea. Analysts have suggested that China may be placing Shenyang J-11 air superiority fighters on runways it is building on reclaimed land in the Spratlys. The placement of the fighter, which is based on the Russian Sukhoi Su-27, would extend the reach of China's air force 1,000 kilometers further south. The Philippines and the United States are also set to hold joint military exercises in the coming week.
Japan scrambles fighter planes at levels not seen since the Cold War. Japan is scrambling fighter jets at a rate not seen since the height of the Cold War to ward off incursions from a newly assertive Russia and from China's aggressive exertion of sovereignty in the East China Sea. Instances of fighters scrambled by Japan have jumped 16% in the past year. Japanese fighters scrambled 944 times in the year ending March 31st, the second highest number since records began in 1958, as tensions with China and Russia escalate. Both Russia and China's defense budgets have increased aggressively in recent years. Compared with 2005, Chinese defense spending rose 167%, and Russia's 97%, while Japan's decreased by 3.7%. Japan is planning a slight increase in defense spending, with plans to buy more long-range patrol aircraft, cargo jets, and helicopter carriers, as well as V-22 Ospreys and F-35 stealth fighters. Russian combat planes frequently stage incursions near Hokkaido and the disputed Kuril Islands, while Chinese combat planes have been focused on the East China Sea, near the disputed Senkaku Islands, which China claims as the Diaoyu Islands. Russian planes also fly around the Japanese archipelago, while the past year has seen a number of flights by Chinese planes over Japanese airspace and into the Western Pacific.
China bans Japanese AV star Sora Aoi from media events. Media sources in China reported that the government has officially banned the Japanese AV star from holding meet and greet, signing events, and appearing on television shows. But Chinese officials are forgetting that Sora Aoi is so much more than just a woman who takes her clothes off in front of a camera. She's also a singer and an actress. Of course, the government claims that the censorship is all in the name of common decency, but it may just be because they aren't willing to watch their citizens spend money on a Japanese star. Sora Aoi easily nets $150,000 per event, if not more, and she has over 15 million fans on her Twitter alone. While the ban sucks, I sincerely doubt Sora Aoi is going to suffer any career issues with her gigantic fan base. Also, according to media reports, Sora Aoi will be continuing to gather fans as she turns her attention to building a fan base in Southeast Asia. And with looks like hers, I doubt it's going to be much of a challenge for her.
China building new military base near disputed islands. China is building a large military base on islands it controls near the disputed Senkaku Island. The base is being constructed in the Nanchi Islands off the coast of China's Zhejiang province, about 300 kilometers northwest of the Japanese-controlled Senkaku Islands, which China claims and calls the Diaoyu. Several large radar installations have already been built at high points on the main Nanji Island. Landing strips have been paved, most likely for aircraft operating from warships or patrol vessels. More landing strips are scheduled to be built on an island near the main island in 2015. China's new base is aimed at strengthening surveillance over its self-proclaimed Air Defense Identification Zone, which covers a portion of what Japan considers its own territory in the East China Sea, and to enhance China's ability to respond militarily to threats in the region. Japan is also building a surveillance center on Yasukuni Island to monitor activity around the Senkakus, which are administered by Tokyo but claimed by China and Taiwan.
China's air-headed air defense zone pisses off the neighbors. China has declared an air defense identification zone over much of the East China Sea, including the disputed Diaoyu ties. The move alters the status quo and conflicts with Japan and South Korea's own. The Chinese Defense Ministry has said that military aircraft must report a flight plan, maintain two-way radio communications, identify themselves, and respond in a timely and accurate manner. China says it will adopt defensive emergency measures in response to aircraft that do not cooperate or refuse to follow its lame and ridiculous instructions, which no one will agree to. China just wants to test the world. Its greed is boundless. It probably even has its eye on the new volcanic island that formed in Japanese waters last week. What do you think?
China prepares for huge, over-the-top World War II revisionism parade. Real soldiers don't fight, they parade. At least in China. For the past 3 months, the bestest of the best in Beijing have been preparing to commemorate the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, or aka World War II. To start it off, China decided to get creative with a film called The Cairo Declaration, which portrays CCP dear leader Mao Zedong as vital to a conference that he actually never attended. China was represented by nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek, who later got his ass whooped by Mao in China's Civil War. The parade will offer buffet meals and free Wi-Fi to foreign soldiers who are dumb enough to attend the September 3rd event. China also claims that more than 80% of the weapons on show during the parade have never before been seen by the public. But while China's busy tooting its own horn, the reality of World War II is that Japan crushed the Chinese. CKS spent most of his time stealing money and supplies from the US, and it was the Americans who ultimately ended the war. Or maybe it really was Mao.
US and Japan forged new rules to expand military cooperation. Newly revised US-Japan guidelines for defense cooperation agreed upon in New York on Monday will change the way that Japan's military operates worldwide. Japan's current defense strategy is defensive in nature and limited to deploying forces only if Japan is directly attacked. But China's rising military might and North Korea's instability has raised concerns in Japan. The revision of the US-Japan Defense Cooperation Guidelines alter this by allowing Japan to come to the defense of other countries if it is deemed in Japan's interest. The guidelines will allow Japan to help defend US ships in waters surrounding Japan, and the use of Japan's missile defense system to intercept weapons launched at the United States, even if Japan itself is not under attack. The new guidelines will also streamline information and weapons sharing and allow for Japan and the US to engage in joint surveillance and reconnaissance operations. The US will deploy US Navy P-8 surveillance planes as well as Air Force Global Hawk drones to Japan this year. The US will also replace the Japan-based carrier USS George Washington with the more advanced USS Ronald Reagan. During the meeting, the US restated its position that the disputed Senkaku Islands claimed by both Tokyo and Beijing are under the administration of Japan and fall within the scope of the US-Japan Mutual Defense Treaty.
Japanese language input applications made by Chinese internet giant Baidu are secretly logging users' keystrokes and collecting their personal information and sending it to servers in China, according to new reports today from NHK and the Yomiuri Shimbun. Baidu IME converts hiragana phonetic script into kanji characters and katakana phonetic script. Baidu IME can be downloaded for free and is said to have more than 2 million users in Japan. Baidu Sumeji, a Japanese language input app for smartphones and tablets, is also growing in popularity in Japan. Internet security firm NetAgent discovered the data mining and traced it back to Baidu's servers in China. The Japanese government on Thursday ordered all of its agencies, as well as research institutes and 12 universities, including the University of Tokyo, to suspend use of Baidu IME. Baidu's corporate office in Japan responded to the news by saying that the company will strive to fix the problem so that users can operate the software worry-free.
Japan calls on China to halt exploration work in East China Sea. Japan on Tuesday called on China to halt the construction of oil and gas exploration platforms in a disputed area of the East China Sea. The claims were made as part of a defense white paper approved on Tuesday by the Japanese cabinet. The disputed area lies southeast of Shanghai, and Japanese officials said that there are 16 Chinese platforms close to Japan's side of the sea, with 12 of those platforms being built since June 2013. Japan has long expressed concern that platforms close to the maritime border could be used to extract resources from the Japanese side of the line. Tokyo is also worried that the platforms could be used as radar stations to monitor air and sea activity in the region, which is close to the disputed Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands, claimed by both countries. China immediately hit back, saying that it would make a necessary reaction after Beijing had reviewed the full text of Japan's white paper.
Justin Bieber visits Yasukuni Shrine to drop new CD, Clueless. Bieber is back, like hemorrhoids. After his latest hit, Clueless, dropped Tuesday at the Yasukuni Shrine, the Japanese shrine that honors the war dead. Only problem, the shrine also includes some World War II war criminals. An Instagram photo of two people standing at Yasukuni with the caption, "Thank you for your blessings," received about 600,000 likes from people who obviously know their geopolitics. Unfortunately, a few hundred million Chinese Bieber who also know their geopolitics were collectively butthurt, along with Koreans upset at Bieber's visit. Hopefully, Bieber will be kind enough to post some videos on Instagram of his Yasukuni trip. No doubt he conducted himself like all good Canadians do in Asia. But one thing's for certain. All the dead enshrined at Yasukuni would surely have been Beliebers too.
Tourists from China strike again. 3 women shut down the airport. 3 women from China caused an airport in Okinawa, Japan to shut down its security gates for an hour, delay over 24 flights, ground 5 flights, and force thousands of passengers to retake security checks. Airport authorities were forced to shut down the security gates after they discovered the security breach. 3 tourists from China wandered into the baggage reclaim area and ended up at the departure gates. Flights were held and all passengers had to retake security checks, including passengers who had already boarded planes waiting to take off. Allegedly, the 3 women were just very determined to go shopping at duty-free shops while they waited for their connecting flight to Tokyo. Tourists from China have such a voracious appetite and reputation for being shopaholics that Hong Kongers have nicknamed them locusts, a dig at their insatiable appetites and tendency to descend upon shops in swarms. It's just yet another incident of tourists from China behaving badly abroad, and Chinese netizens agree. One netizen wrote, "They should be banned from traveling abroad." And China's State Tourism Administration agrees and said it would compile a database of badly behaved tourists and circulate it to travel companies. Hopefully it'll help, or not.
Chinese jets get annoyingly close to Japanese spy planes over East China Sea. Chinese fighter pilots got up close and personal with 2 Japanese reconnaissance planes on Saturday in 2 separate incidents in overlapping air defense identification zones claimed by both countries. The first flyby occurred when a pair of Chinese Su-27 fighters flew within 150 feet of a Japanese P-3C. Later, a pair of Chinese fighters also came within 100 feet of a Japanese YS-11 plane. Japan has regularly ignored China's new zone, which Beijing announced last year. China immediately backed off after the US sent a pair of B-52 bombers through the zone without incident. China has confirmed the reports, but said the jets were just enforcing the air defense identification zone. All countries should just learn from China and extend their air defense zones to ridiculous sizes. That would solve the problem. China seizes Japanese cargo ship over pre-World War II debt. The Shanghai Maritime Court seized the Japanese cargo ship owned by Mitsui OSK Lines on Saturday over a debt it says is related to unpaid compensation for 2 Chinese ships leased in, wait for it, 1936. The Chinese ships, owned by WWII Shipping, were later used by the Japanese Army and sank at sea. In 1988, two grandchildren of the WWII owner filed a lawsuit looking for $160 million US. The court worked with Confucius-like speed and awarded $30 million US in damages and compensation in 2007. Then, unpredictably, the Supreme People's Court rejected the Japanese company's appeal in 2010. Luckily, China's legal system is about as transparent as its polluted sky. So, the Chinese court ruling will no doubt be taken very seriously by Japan and the international community. Rumors circulated that Japan seized a plane of Chinese tourists in response, but released them 2 hours later because they were just too annoying. More importantly, will trade be affected between China and Japan? Probably not.
3 Chinese ships sailed into disputed waters near Japanese-controlled islands in East China Sea, known as Senkaku in Japan and the Diaoyu in China, on Monday morning. Incursion was reported in an area where Japanese and Chinese territorial waters overlap in the East China Sea, off the coast of one of the Senkaku Islands purchased and acquired by the Japanese government in September 2012. 3 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered into the 12 nautical mile territorial waters off one of the Senkaku islets at around 10 a.m., Japan's Coast Guard said. This is the first time China has entered Japanese territorial waters since February 2nd.
Japan is planning to seek $139,600 in compensation from the captain of a Chinese trawler that crashed into 2 Japanese patrol ships in 2010. The incident took place near the disputed islands in the East China Sea, known as Senkaku in Japan and as Diaoyu in Chinese. On September 7, 2010, Jan Jizhong's trawler was fishing near the disputed Japanese-controlled islands. A Japanese Coast Guard patrol ship attempted to stop the Chinese fishing boat. Zhang ignored the request and steered his trawler away. It collided with the patrol boat. The Japanese sent 2 other patrol boats, the Mitsuki and the Hataruma, to chase after the fishing boat. The Chinese trawler then crashed into the Mitsuki. The captain was later arrested by Japanese Coast Guard and released.